Today, guys, my cat is in my office. He was just so comfortable that I didn't want to kick him out. So he's on the couch behind me having a little bath time right now.
I want Loki's opinion on the channel, actually.
Hey, Channel Insiders. I'm your host, Katie Bavoso, and welcome to Channel Insider Partner POV. We are officially through quarter one of 2025, and it's safe to say the year is off to anything but a slow start. We have a new presidential administration here in the US. China is officially a threat in the AI race with a model that rivals many top US-based brands, and Intel has a new CEO. So let's talk about it. I'm joined once again today by the Channel Insider editorial team. We have managing editor Victoria Durgin and writer Jordan Smith. Thank you both so much for joining me, team.
Yeah, good to see you.
So glad we got invited back.
We did it.
It would have been quite awkward in the Slack channel if I didn't bring you both back on, or only brought one of you back on and not the other. No, I loved last time, so I'm glad that you both came back and trusted me to do this once again. So why don't we jump in and start with our first question, which of course is, without burying the lead, what stands out in your minds as the biggest story in the channel in Q1 of 2025? Victoria, would you like to get us started?
Oh, sure, why not? You know, it's funny, I was looking back on all of our coverage, obviously, to prepare for this, and I think the obvious answer that we'll talk about is AI continues to be a pretty strong story, but I'd also like to point out a thread that we've been pulling for a while, which is the prevalence of the hyperscaler marketplaces as a go-to-market approach, not only that partners are taking, but that other vendors are taking. We've covered several companies whose solutions have gone live either on the AWS marketplace, on Azure, on Google Cloud. And it's becoming a go-to-market that isn't just a nice to have, but is actually a necessity for these companies to stay competitive and to stay engaged with the channel and with end customers more broadly. So that's what I've been kind of noticing as a pull through that doesn't always get the big flashy headline moment, but I think is steadily happening in the background.
I think that's a great point. And I think to that point as well, we're seeing a lot of, I hesitate to use the word contention, but I am hearing a lot of noise from the space that is made up of distributors, marketplaces, and general platforms inside of that space. Everybody wants to argue that they are one specific thing and why that specific thing makes them the best. So as we continue deeper into 2025, I ultimately want to hear not necessarily why what they're called is making them the best, but how they're just able to service their partners and ultimately their customers the best. So I look forward to that conversation developing. And you're right, it might not sound like the biggest or sexiest story, but it is one that I think is going to really pepper the entire year and color the entire year with that conversation. And Jordan, let's move on to you. What's been the biggest story of Q1 so far in your mind?
Yeah, you mentioned it at the top. And if you hadn't heard, listeners, there is a new presidential administration in the United
What?
States. I know it's crazy. I'm just out about this actually. But no, the biggest story to me is how much it has been impacting the channel on a cybersecurity level. I spoke with Carl Palachuk, who is a founding member of the National Society of IT Service Providers. And he's also a member of board of directors, and Steve Kazan, the president of the NSITSP. They've been sounding the alarm on the changes that the administration has been making to CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. I apologize for all the acronyms. And that includes the elimination of CISA advisory committees, reductions in force at CISA, and cuts in funding for the agency. And they share a lot of concerns about how this reduction in force is going to negatively impact the channel by making cybersecurity teams work harder. It's going to lower the chances that an MSP or an IT service provider is going to be able to identify major cyber threats that happen, because CISA is such a centralized location for identifying threats and providing those notifications for people. And without it, there could be a lot of different noises, let's say, coming from other different entities trying to identify these cybersecurity threats. So they are really they're sounding the alarm, like I said, telling people they need to reach out to their representatives, and they have a lot of MSPs in their membership. So it's something that's really important and something that I think is going to persist not just in Q1, but over potentially the next 4 years.
I will also point out one of the biggest stories that I think came out of Q1 is DeepSeek. We saw that the Chinese startup AI company really disrupted. There was a week where I don't think we talked about anything else but DeepSeek. And of course, the fallout from it, we saw a lot of people continuing the discussion around AI and what this means about the US racing against China as far as becoming the top AI supplier, what it means for the chip market. Does this mean that the chip market does not need to be as expensive as we've seen it be because they were using subpar chips allegedly to create the DeepSeek model? Now, of course, we also know that OpenAI is pursuing legal action saying that essentially they ripped off their own models, used their models to train the DeepSeek models. It's confusing, but I think this really showed that the conversation around AI is only just beginning. Is it impacting the channel so much? At first, I think we were all asking that question and then quickly learned that we're still seeing the channel try to figure out how they're able to sell this as an independent product. Of course, if you want to see more about the DeepSeek coverage that we have, you can head to our YouTube page, youtube.com/channelinsider_news and trends. All right, let's move on from there and talk about the predictions that we had last year, which I know was literally only 3 months ago that we were making these predictions, but I think it's important to kind of look back and see how quickly the needle is moving. When it comes to those predictions that you made last year, are you seeing any of them already come true? Jordan, let's start with you on this one.
Yeah, so my prediction from last year was the importance of cybersecurity with the whole proliferation of AI and how AI is going to make threat actors become even more agile. They're going to help them be able to just take their game to the next level, so to speak, free them up to do other tasks, just like it frees up you in your workspace if you're utilizing AI for your work. And I think that we have started to see um, AI actually start to become more of a tool within cybersecurity tools to help combat some of the things that we might be seeing. For example, Trend Micro, they introduced their first proactive cybersecurity AI. It's a specialized cybersecurity LLM that helps predict and prevent threats across an entire attack surface in any environment. And then we have companies like Cognizant and CrowdStrike who have partnered on cybersecurity transformation. They're using AI powered solutions for SecOps. So rather than, I guess, kind of using the same sort of cybersecurity tools, they're using AI to help amplify them on their own merits. That's, of course, another trend that's going to persist throughout the year in the coming years.
Well, Jordan, thank you so much. Victoria, how about you? Any predictions that you made at the end of 2024 that you're already seeing come true at the top of 2025?
Yeah, I think similarly to Jordan, when we made those predictions, we were kind of basing them on what we were already seeing trend upwards, right? And so I think because we're still kind of so close to that, we've been pretty on par so far. Like I said in that end of year video that we did, and like I said even at the top of this episode, I think this is really a year where channel go to market and channel business strategies are going to start to see a shift. So whether that's, as I referenced in our recap, more vendors coming into the channel space and trying to make a pretty serious play. We've covered several new channel partner programs already at the start of this year. And that followed a huge momentum that we saw last quarter of 2024, and the marketplace conversation and the platform conversation and the am I a reseller or a service provider, and what is the difference anymore, and what is an MSSP, and what does all of that mean? I think um, that kicked off kind of strong this year, maybe not as strong as the deep seek of it all or of, the presidential administration of it all, but it's another drumbeat that I think we'll keep focusing on. So maybe not as strong in Q1, but I've got my eye on it for Q2 and beyond.
On the point that you made about defining like an MSSP, that is a conversation I'm having more and more because I think the definition is starting to solidify more as far as what we've seen. There's been sort of like this unspoken understanding of you need to have your own SOC. You need to know exactly where that is, who those people are, what their birthdays are, and where they're coming from. When it comes to defining yourself as an MSSP. And I do find that the ones that are doing the work and putting that effort in are getting much angrier when they do hear others kind of saying, yeah, we've got our own, but they're outsourcing their SOC to a vendor. I think it's so important to be very specific on these terms. And I do see that we're kind of getting closer and closer to these definitions that are also reaching the customer base, where they're trying to express this is what an MSSP is, and these are the questions you need to ask and the education that you need to go through to really determine, are you talking to the people that you want to be talking to? So yeah, I do look forward to that definition to become a little bit more Merriam-Webster. Like, we'll find out as we go further into the year. As far as my predictions that I made about 2025 back in 2024, which ones may already be coming true, it's more of a trend that I spoke about in our 2024 year in review episode that I'm seeing kind of continue. And I'll back up and talk about what I mean. I had talked about the CrowdStrike driven Microsoft outage that happened in the summer of 2024. And I touched on how this is an example of government tools still being largely commercial technology based. However, in the last full week of March this year, we saw a new issue: government officials intentionally using commercial tools to communicate about what's widely been agreed upon is classified war plans. As we know, many top members of the federal security, intelligence, defense, and executive offices were a part of a group chat discussing attack plans in Yemen hosted on Signal, an open source encrypted disappearing message app. But they accidentally included a journalist from the publication The Atlantic. This to me is just another example of the crossroads and intersection between commercial technology and federal dealings, government dealings at the highest level. I also think it's an example of how there needs to be some updates in the federal government with how they use the tools that they do have, because they do have federally approved communication tools. They need to be able to have easier options, because it's clearly showing me that the options that they do have are not the easiest ones. The avenues of communication that they do have to talk about these very sensitive, often classified matters are not necessarily ones that make sense in the year 2025. They're not convenient, they're not easy, they're clunky, whatever you want to call them. So that really indicates to me that the easiest decision is not always the right one. And I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes a more topic of conversation that we see more of, and it might inspire there being some more ease of use of that technology as we move through the year. But that intersection of commercial technology and government dealings, there it is again. So that is something that I noticed kind of continue into this year. Let's move on to our next question in today's sort of wrap up. What surprised you the most in the past 3 months?
Nothing. I had everything perfectly predicted and figured out. I'm kidding, obviously. I think for me, one of the most surprising things that came out of the quarter as a whole was just the endless ramp up on AI. And I know many people are probably going, well, no, duh. But I had wondered by the end of last year if we were starting to see a bit of a cliff, not in terms of AI excitement, but in terms of what everyone was coming to market with, and whether we were getting to a point where we were saturated and everybody had an AI something. And so nobody really would necessarily rush to the latest thing. And I think even without the DeepSeek questions and the model questions generally on the chatbot and the LLM side, we then started the year and everyone said, now it's agentic AI. And then we had a whole month and a half of, okay, what is agentic AI? And so it surprised me, not from a technical standpoint, but I think just from a wider conversation standpoint, that we're still very much in the early stages of, call it a hype cycle, call it an adoption circle, whatever you want to refer to it as. We're still very, very front and center on whatever the new shiny thing is. We all want to rush to it, and then everybody seems to go, okay, wait, but how do I use this? And, okay, wait, but how do I sell it? And so it never ceases to amaze me how much we still cover anything AI touches.
No, that's a great point. And I have a feeling that's going to continue, but I agree. I wonder where the cliff will be. When will this just be another tool in our tool belt and not the it thing right now? Jordan, for you, what's been the biggest surprise of Q1 in 2025?
My surprise kind of dovetails pretty well with what Victoria was just talking about. I was a little bit shocked to see that there were not as many major funding, major investment moves that I assumed there would be, considering the strong push into AI. What I mean by this is funding from investors. IT spend still going off the rails here. But there have been a few infusions of cash for companies like Nerdio and Maverick, who just did a rebrand. Instead, I think what we're seeing here is partnerships have driven solutions for AI powered capabilities, and expansions of partnerships. I'm thinking of Cisco expanding their partnership with NVIDIA, Databricks and SAP, Rafe and Netris, and IronScales and CrowdStrike. There have been more of these, like, we are going to use our best practices, our best solutions together, rather than seeking out funding sources so they could build up their own AIs from scratch in this past quarter, which I thought was a little bit surprising. I thought everybody would be trying to get their own best AI product possible, but instead what we're seeing is growth in the channel by working together, and I think that's really cute.
For me, I think my biggest surprise was not necessarily AI. My surprise, Intel has a new CEO. I know that's not a surprise. They were looking for one. So that's kind of how that works out. His name is Lip-Bu Tan. What surprised me actually is that he quit the board at Intel in August 2024 after spending about 2 years on it. He quit because he didn't get along allegedly with the board, and he was really clashing with CEO at the time, Pat Gelsinger, over many things, including, and here's where I'm going back into the AI conversation, including Intel's lagging behind in its AI strategy, which I think was a large part as to why Pat Gelsinger suddenly exited the company in December of 2024. We do know that Intel, it was no secret, the AI strategy was not necessarily up to par with where we saw many other competing companies, especially like NVIDIA. So to kind of put this into perspective, I think we're definitely going to see a lot more of an AI conversation happening with Intel in the same sentence, because we do know that Lip-Bu Tan was CEO for more than a decade of Cadence Systems, which does have a pretty robust AI offering. So I look forward to seeing how that's going to impact Intel, where their messaging is going. I do have to include that I have a lot of questions around what's going on with Intel's foundry plans. They were supposed to open that foundry, that Intel chip maker shop, essentially, in Ohio this year. That was supposed to be happening as far as the original plans go. It's been pushed back a few times now, and now it's being pushed back to 2030 as far as when it'll open and go into operation. But we'll see, especially in this administration wanting to bring things back stateside when it comes to manufacturing. I can imagine this would be an interesting conversation, but I think it all depends on whether or not Intel is really going to go the AI route, or if they're also going to still double down and invest in their chip strategy. Now, moving on from there, are we seeing, and Victoria, this goes back to how you put it with that cliff relation in AI, are we seeing the AI craze continue or start to cool?
I think that the AI craze has continued. It has evolved in some ways. I think that it's being featured in so many more solutions for MSPs, whether that's through security solutions, email, data management, analytics. We are seeing this being utilized. Agentic AI is kind of what I'm referring to with the evolution of AI and what people are looking for. That has grown significantly. It combines just traditional AI with newer tech that we're developing, creating autonomous agents, doing things like automating workflows for people, improving customer service experience, and even developing software. So I think that the craze has continued, but maybe not in necessarily in the way that we thought of, AI taking over all these very large functions. It's still very much a tool that's utilized within other tools.
I think the AI question is becoming so interesting because the conversation seems to be splintering a bit in two directions. And what I mean when I say that is Jordan and I spent a lot of time talking to solution providers and to vendors who in one breath will say, yes, this is revolutionary. It is game changing. The industry will never look the same. The way that we work will never look the same. And then on the flip side of that, saying, but it's not a magic bullet. And not only is it not the magic bullet to save everything, but I do think we've also seen conversations begin to shift more towards, well, actually, if you want to adopt AI efficiently, you need to do all this work first. You need to get your data in order. You need to have a roadmap. You need to examine what your ROI is. And I think that conversation has not cooled the demand for AI, but it has slowed the adoption process a little bit. And I think that goes back to even what we talked about earlier, Katie, when you brought up the convenience versus doing the right thing the right way, right? I think last year was a big push of a year for end customers, for partners, and for vendors to go, here's the new thing, we're going to jump on this. And I think Q1 of this year has been, okay, maybe those earlier plans when we jumped on it weren't quite as effective and we didn't necessarily see an ROI that we wanted. So now let's figure out why that is and let's get everything else in order first. We've also covered a lot of new data products and analytic products and management tools for those companies who want to use AI, but who have never thought, frankly, about where their data is and whether it's clean and whether it's usable. And so now I think the conversation isn't just about AI. And maybe this time last year, we were all still very much in the throes of what's a GPT and can Copilot make me a PowerPoint? And now the conversation has shifted a lot to, where is my data stored? What's a data lake? What does on-prem mean? What does cloud mean in this context? So I think like many things in the channel, it's just a maturing conversation, but it's not slowing down either.
For sure. I think it's interesting how the conversation leads back to data once more when we were also having those conversations around cloud, and the answer was good data. It was still data. So it does seem interesting to me that we kind of go off in this direction when we see the new cool thing. And then the conversation always leads back to a more mature point, which centers around what is the data going into it? What are you putting into it? Is it clean? How are you leveraging it? How are you gleaning value from it? Where is that value? How much of it do you need to actually store? We really need to just never stop talking about data in the context of any new technology that is kind of peppering the channel, because I think it's always going to lead back to, what does your data have to do with it? And then finding that answer out. So thank you both for sharing your thoughts on that. Going from there, when it comes to trends, whether it be channel business trends or technology trends, what are you seeing?
I think the answer here is kind of a whole lot, but maybe nothing new. And what I mean by that is we've spent a lot of time hearing from partners and their end customers about this kind of question on cloud, right? I think cloud we can look at as the hype cycle before AI became the shiny thing, right? And everyone jumped to cloud. And we spent a lot of time in January listening to people go, I don't think this is necessarily cheaper or better than my on-prem systems were. And then that, in the way that discourse works, spawned a whole bunch of, no, actually, cloud is better. You're not using it right. And then we started hearing multi-cloud and hybrid cloud and, all of these different terms. And I think what it comes down to ultimately at the end of the day is that every conversation is about what's best for the end customer.
Mhm.
And what we're seeing maybe is just more partners being willing to go to bat for their customers and saying, I'm going to look at what they need and then I'm going to pick that tooling appropriately. And so there's been a lot of conversation on shifting back, so to speak, whether cloud is dead, whether cloud is having a resurgence moment, the kind of optimization conversation, again, to go back to the data point on what are you doing and are you efficiently managing things. I think will probably continue if and when we start to have the conversations on whether budgets are scaling back, depending on the economic uncertainties or certainties of what the rest of the year looks like. We might see that cloud conversation really pick up some steam on, I have this line item in my budget. I don't even know if I'm using this thing fully. What do I do with it? And so that's where we see companies like Nerdio with the new cash infusion that it received earlier this quarter really standing up and saying, this is how you do cloud. We are going to help you do cloud right. And I think that will probably continue beyond Q1 and probably beyond this year, really.
Oh, absolutely. I think the conversation with cloud is not a specific conversation centering around public, private, or on prem. I think it's centered around many more kind of offshoots of that conversation when it comes back to economic headwinds, budgetary needs, when it comes to security, when it comes to AI, when it comes to what exactly are we using this for? And is this something that is better or is it cheaper? Or which of those two are the priority for us? So I don't think cloud is an independent conversation. I think it's going to shift with the needs of customers that are going to be based on several other factors, including everything I just said. Jordan, kind of going off of that, for you, what trends have you been seeing really take on, continue from 2024, or kind of take on a new life of their own this year in 2025 in the first quarter?
I don't know if this is necessarily an emerging trend, but I'm going to go back to the partnership angle. I think integrations, developing or expanding partnerships, adding more solutions to marketplaces that organizations are expanding. That really seems to be off to a hot start in the first quarter of this year. And I think they are expanding their partnerships, partnership programs, and developing these integrations because they want to commit to having a more partnership first approach on services. Um, so it's a little bit more like the Arnold Schwarzenegger, Carl Weathers Predator handshake meme, rather than people standing on opposite ends of the room, kind of eyeing each other, not necessarily sure whether or not they can work together. And it's been a much more collaborative first quarter than I think we've been seeing.
Jordan is really good at relating everything back to memes and references, by the way, audience, if you haven't picked up on that right now. And that's in our Slack channels and in every aspect of our meetings, and what we do is Jordan's really able to paint a picture by using some sort of pop culture reference. So please keep it up. Please never stop. I've actually been waiting for you to drop some sort of football movie analogy,
I
right?
was gonna say, where's the draft day metaphor? Come on,
Where's the
Jordan.
draft day metaphor? Jordan, what is your draft day metaphor? Like, make one up right now.
I just thought of the Predator one like 2 minutes ago. It's
We can only push you so far. So let's talk about what we're going to be paying attention to in quarter two as we get started there. When it comes to the who, the what, and the why, what's capturing your attention and what will you be paying close attention to as we move into the second quarter of the year? Jordan, do you want to get us started there?
Yeah, so I am going to be keeping my eye on what CrowdStrike will be doing throughout the year. We spoke last time about, of course, the fallout from the major IT outage. And I think what we've been seeing is they've been bouncing back pretty smoothly and low key from it. They've just been putting their head down and developing solutions, establishing partnerships, expanding partnerships. Like just in Q1, they've expanded their partner services, integrated with companies like Iron Scales, I mentioned before, companies like Nasuni. And they've also partnered more recently with Sonic Wall and Accenture. So they are, just kind of putting in the work, establishing better relationships with larger companies in the industry, with smaller ones, and I'm liking what I'm seeing from them in terms of just bouncing back and having a really good Q1.
Victoria, for you, what's going to hold your attention in 2025 and Q2?
Yeah, I think we've touched on this in this call a bit even today, but for me, it's this kind of ongoing shift in partner programs
Mhm.
and what a partner program is, and B, what partners in the program actually want to get out of it. I think we're starting to see a shift away from that very traditional gold, silver, bronze, 3-tier, you sell a certain amount, you get a certain amount back, into a more kind of holistic approach that vendors are taking to supporting their partners, not just in market with their tooling, but in market generally speaking. I think there's a real shift in understanding that most partners have diversified their stacks pretty well. By this point, you don't see a whole lot of people who only sell one or two things anymore. And so, as a result of that, all of these vendors now have to go, okay, I need to be realistic and know that you're not just selling me. And if you're not just selling me, how do I keep you selling me so you don't go and sell something else and drop me completely? So I think that's where I'll be focused for Q2 and probably Q3 as well, just on what these business models really mean for ultimately what technology gets to end customers in market, because the channel, as anybody knows, is as much a business conversation as it is a tech conversation, and I think sometimes it's easy to lose sight of the business angle because we get so focused and nitty-gritty on the technical aspect.
So as far as what I'm going to be watching, it's actually a who I'm going to be watching, and that person is Fred Vacola. Right at the top of the year, we found out that Fred is stepping down in his role as CEO at Kaseya and is becoming vice chairman of the company. This is very strange news. Nobody quite knows why or what was the reasoning for it. Fred himself has said that it's just he's basically worked himself half to death. He's been on every single day, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day for the last decade. I don't doubt that at all. I mean, as we know, being a CEO is a really demanding job, and especially at a company that's had such a good year in 2024 as Kaseya. But it's still very startling because I think we also, from a perspective, well, from a branding perspective, we associate Fred so much as the face of Kaseya. He's been a very vocal member of that team, a vocal member of that company. So I'm surprised and confused, and I'll be watching. As far as some other incidents that we've seen going on in the top of 2025, that HPE acquisition of Juniper, but now there is a block for it. So what do you think is going to happen there, Jordan? And just kind of like ruminate on that for me for a minute and let us know what's going on.
The proposed Hewlett Packard Enterprises acquisition of Juniper Networks was all the way in January of last year. DOJ, a couple months ago, they filed basically a complaint saying that this acquisition was not good for competition, that was actually anti competitive. HPE denied these allegations, saying that it would actually help them with competition against Cisco. So they're kind of locking horns on that. In terms of what it possibly means, these are two massive network equipment providers in the industry. If HPE was able to acquire Juniper, I believe that means that both HPE and Cisco would lock up like 70% of the market when it comes to enterprise grade WLAN, more acronyms for you. That market. So, in terms of what it means, I think Victoria might be able to speak to that.
From the weeds of it all, right? I don't think anyone was necessarily expecting this administration's DOJ to be super interested in blocking mergers and acquisitions. I mean, this came as kind of a surprise to Jordan's point. This has been a year in the making, right? So I think for the most part, partners had either put it out of sight, out of mind, or had kind of forgotten that it wasn't a done deal. I think we forget sometimes how long these agreements actually take to go into effect. And so what many saw as kind of a 24 story suddenly was an issue in 25. And I think there's a broader question maybe in market now on, are there going to be more efforts taken by DOJ over the next few years to maybe block some acquisitions at a time when people thought the markets would be pretty wide open, whether that's from an M&A perspective or from an IPO perspective. And now in the first quarter of this year alone, we've seen Wiz take the M&A route, get bought out by Google, and a massive deal for both companies. When just last year there were a lot of questions about whether Wiz would just stay its own thing and take the IPO route instead. And so I think we're seeing the markets still feeling themselves out a bit. Obviously, HPE has put a pretty strong foot forward that they believe their deal is perfectly in the right, and they tend to fight DOJ on that. We have no idea where that's gonna go, frankly, yet, and I'm not going to offer a prediction, but I will be keeping an eye on the rest of the market now, given the Google and Wiz and the HP and Juniper of it all, and seeing where and how the channel landscape shakes out this year.
Yeah, and from an economic standpoint, it'll be interesting to see who IPOs this year, if at all, if we're going to see a lot of that activity. There's always one, at least. But it'll also be interesting to see who goes the merger and acquisition route, because I think right now, economically across the country, we are seeing some instability. So we're going to have to find out why some of the decisions will be made the way that they will be, and we're going to have to watch the market for that. So interesting conversation to continue with as we go through. I think it's still too early to tell, but I think in Q2, we'll really start to see as we get halfway through the year, kind of more of that sort of theory take shape. So thank you both. All right, so we're all like on the road a lot this quarter, and I'd love to know where you're going to be out in the world and where people can find you and say, "Oh my God, I saw you on that podcast, that video podcast, Channel Insider Partner POV. I'm such a big fan." So where can we find you out in the world this quarter? Victoria, tell us where you're going to be.
Yeah, so actually by the time this video drops, so to speak, it'll be coming up real soon, but I'll be at NerdioCon in April. I'm very excited to be on the ground there. If you happen to be a Nerdio partner and you happen to be there, please don't hesitate to come find me. Come reach out, come say hi. We can absolutely talk. I'd love to hear if you agree. I'd love to hear if you disagree with everything that we said in this call. I think the most exciting times for me are when someone's like, I don't think you were right about that. So I will be in Palm Springs in April, which I know is a real sacrifice that I'm making for the bit of the order here, but that is where you can find me.
It was like pulling teeth to make you go to Palm
I
Springs
know
for
something about
NerdioCon.
that was rough, but
Ugh, well, Jordan, you're also going to be out in the world in Q2 of 2025. So where can we find you and when?
I will be heading to Florida for SAS Innovate 2025 in Orlando. I'll be there from May 6th through the 9th covering that event. So keep an eye out for me. I'll be walking around the conference hall.
I will also be on the road in this quarter, a little towards the middle of it. I'll be at Scale Computing Platform 2025 in Las Vegas. I'll be doing plenty of videos there and speaking with partners and learning more about their partnership with Scale Computing, and definitely keeping my ear to the ground for what's happening there. So if there's other ones, there's always a chance for us to go to more of these events. You can always reach out to us if you'd like coverage at your events or discuss some media opportunities with me. We love to talk about that. But other than that, thank you both so much for joining me today. And if we want to reach out to you and talk to either of you and get you to come to our events, whether it be in Palm Springs or Hawaii or something like that, not manifesting here or anything, where can we go to reach out to both of you? Jordan, starting with you, what are your handles? What are your contacts?
You can, of course, find all of my writing on channelinsider.com, a great website. You can drop me a line at jordan.smith@technologyadvice.com if you have any pitches that you want to throw our way. And you can look for me on LinkedIn. You might have to include technology advice into your search, but you can find me.
And Victoria, where can we find you on the internet, or if we'd like to reach out to you?
yes, I am. I'm on the internet. You can always email me. I'm victoria.durgin@technologyadvice.com. Like I said, I would love to hear from you, whether you're a solution provider, whether you're a reseller, whether you're a vendor. More the merrier in my inbox, I always say. So feel free to shoot me a line there. You can find me on LinkedIn, just under my name, Victoria Durgin, Durgin. I think I'm a little less common, but you can always throw technology advice on the end of that if you can't find me. You can find our page on LinkedIn as well. And we do have an email inbox that Jordan and I both check pretty frequently. So if you don't hear from one of us directly, feel free to reach out at news@channelinsider.com if you need anything else from our editorial team, and we're happy to be in touch.
Thank you both so much. And of course, I'm Katie Bavoso. You can find me on Channel Insider, all our videos for Channel Insider Partner POV. So channelinsider.com, at youtube.com/channelinsider_news and trends. You could find us on all your favorite podcast platforms. We're on all the big ones. And of course, you could find me on LinkedIn as well. It's going to be Katie Bavoso. Sounds exactly as it's spelled. So I'm also on Twitter, or X now it's called a days, at Katie Bavoso. And if you want to reach out to discuss being a part of Channel Insider Partner POV, I love to interview channel providers, the MSPs, the VARs, the ISVs, the GSIs, the SIs, all the letters, all of them out there in the channel. I really would love to speak to you about your success stories and what's differentiating you. So you could reach out to me at partnerpov@channelinsider.com or at katie.bavoso@technologyadvice.com. We'd love to hear from you. And that's it for us in this quarter, folks. We'll be back at the end of Q2 to discuss more about what is moving the needle for channel partners and vendors and everybody else in between when we get there. But thank you so much to Victoria and Jordan for joining me today.
Yeah, stay tuned for whatever Jordan comes up with as a movie reference next time. I look forward to hearing what it is.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you both.